It's a funny place to be, stuck in a seemingly mundane world with an inner knowing that the universe is so much more than our mortal minds can comprehend. Yet we all have the capacity to know peace and our oneness with the wholeness of life. And through these interviews, discussions, and reflections, it is my intention to share this possibility. I'm Ryan Kurczak, and this is the Kriya Yoga Podcast.
It's just been a great morning for some reason. I don't know why I'm feeling so bubbly. So give me a second.
That's all right. Let that express in the podcast. I think people will like to get a taste of it.
All right. All right. Welcome back, everyone, to the Kriya Yoga Podcast. I'm here again with a very special spiritual friend and Kriya Yoga teacher from Ireland, David McGrath. Today, I'm going to be interviewing David on a topic which he actually does not know what I'm going to be asking him about. So it's a bit of a surprise. So we'll see how this goes. But in the meantime, welcome, David. It's wonderful to have you.
Great to be here, Ryan. I'm a little bit concerned, actually, because I feel like in the last podcast that we did, you also had some stuff under your sleeve that I wasn't aware of. Let's see what happens here. Let's see how this goes.
Well, this is more straightforward, and I'm sure that it won't be. It's not under my sleeve. So here's the starting question for our podcast. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Is the age of the guru over?
No, in one word. If I'm going to give lots of words, I would say it's not over, but it also depends on what we mean by guru. Interesting, because we were talking about concepts before we came on here, and I think the word guru is, it represents a concept, and then how we interpret or define that concept will, I suppose, to a certain degree, influence how we answer that question, whether it's an absolute no or where it's a kind of no or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and just so you know, this isn't a trick question. I'm not trying to catch you in something. Well, then I guess let's start with that idea or that term guru. So how would you or how do you define that idea or concept?
I like to just use the definition that Roy used to use, which is essentially a teacher. Guru is a teacher. I know it translates as the dispeller of darkness or the bringer of light. But I've been involved in education for most of my adult life, if not pretty much all my adult life. And so as a teacher, I know that, and as an educator, I know that depending on how passionate somebody is about their subject matter, it can influence those who are learning from the teacher to a greater or lesser degree. So I think just thinking of guru as a teacher, it kind of just simplifies things a lot. It makes things a little bit more accessible for our Western minds who haven't been brought up with terms such as guru. Yeah.
Right. Well, and that is a good point. The idea of guru related to the Western mind, because even in my own experience, while Mr. Davis being, my Kriya Yoga guru and your guru, your teacher as well, and him having Paramahansa Yogananda and so on through the lineage, for me, it's only recently in the last few years, a little ways before Roy passed on, that I was able to accept that statement. And I was always able to accept it, but I always felt weird saying it because it brings up all these kinds of misconceptions about what a guru is. And so part of the reason I wanted to talk about this today was I think it's important to kind of clarify what we mean by that when we say that what we mean when we say that we have a guru. And in my own experience, it seems as important or natural as saying, I'm married to someone, like that is my wife, or that is my husband, or that is my partner. And while of course some people shy away from saying that because of their commitment issues, and maybe that's the reason, or do you think that's the reason the Western mind might have difficulty kind of claiming this idea or accepting this idea of guru because of commitment issues, or a sense of giving away their power or something like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Before we came on, we were talking about the amount of doubt that we should have in the guru, or what the guru says, where you were quoting Roy, or paraphrasing Roy as saying that, well, maybe you'd like to share that, so I can make sure it's right.
Yeah. So anyway, David and I were talking about our mutual trust of each other. And I told him, first of all, there should be at least 2% of me he doesn't trust. and then I remembered a discussion that one of his students told me that Roy said to him, "It's okay, or if you trust me 100%, if you trust me 100% all the way, well, there's something wrong with you. But if you trust me 90%, well, that's probably a healthy. It means it's a healthy relationship."
Yeah. And I just brought that up in reference to the idea of committing to a guru, because the nature of the mind is to doubt, and our whole lives we're making decisions, and for some people that's easier, for others it's more difficult, and the big decisions can be quite a challenge sometimes to just feel confident that we made the right one. And I think that because we invest so much into the idea of our spiritual awakening and to our moving beyond our, let's say, fragmented states of consciousness, and we're doing this all the while acquiring more and more concepts and more teachings and ideas of how we're supposed to go about doing it. And then when we meet an individual who is offering us a clear instruction or a way to go about doing it, we face a challenge then, because it's trying to just work through everything that we've already learned, and then what we're acquiring. And is what we're inquiring meeting what we've already learned to a sufficient enough degree for us to be able to say, yeah, that's spot on, I'll go with that, I trust this person. And just getting back to that 90%, 10%, I suppose it's just the degree to which we're able to be comfortable with the 10% of doubt and just get on with it anyway. I suppose for others, sometimes they just want 100% certainty, and so it can drive them to the point where they're never going to be happy with any one individual giving them the instruction, as good as it might be, just because their mind won't let them. So I suppose that's the influential in terms of their commitment. Yeah.
Well, that reminds me of a story I heard from one of my astrology teacher / friends. He says, people come to astrology, Jyotish Vedic astrology, because they want to be 100% certain of the results of their actions. And a lot of people who come to astrology are looking for that. And he would always say they want God to tell them through astrology that they're making the right decision. And he would say, God will let you know if you've made the right decision after you've made it. That's when you're going to know for 100% certainty if you've made the right decision or not. I think that's a hard thing to swallow, but it brings up that whole idea of faith, which is extremely important in this process. And faith is a hard thing to grasp in itself in these days.
Yeah, what comes to my mind as you're talking there is, because, we use the term guru, but Roy often, I think more often than not, referred to Paramahansa Yogananda as his master. And I know that will have other connotations for people depending on how they define that concept of master. But for me, when we think of a master in terms of anything, whether it be golf or karate or, some other pursuit, there's somebody who've, again, invested a lot of their own time and energy into it, have a strong passion about it, and are able to demonstrate skill in that area. And when we think of a guru as somebody who's sharing the teaching that from their own experience, as a result of their own investing time and energy into the practice themselves, then they have the capacity to pass on that knowledge. And the master then is, not necessarily somebody who, it's not some kind of out there concept. It's actually somebody who demonstrates mastery. It's somebody who demonstrates a skill level which is impressionable, which is actually demonstrative of what they have come to know and understand for themselves. And so when we look at an individual and we think of where they are themselves, you were talking about God, and God letting us know whether we're making the right decisions or if we're living in the right way or not. I don't think a master knows necessarily. Maybe they are more clarified in terms of their conscious awareness, so they're able to be more intuitive with life and to act more spontaneously with the flow of things. But I still think that ultimately it comes back to their having acquired an appreciation for their own being responsible for their life and being responsible for who they are and their thought processes and their interactions and everything, every aspect of their life. And really, I suppose what they're trying to do is to convey to the person who's with them, the student, the disciple, or whoever it might be that's endeavoring to learn the process, is that ultimately they have to become responsible, absolutely responsible, and responsible even though they don't know. So even though they might want their Vedic reading to kind of put this certainty on things, that's, I suppose, what defines the master, is the fact that they're able to live with life, trusting life, and accepting full responsibility for every single thing that they do in terms to create an extra ripple with life. Yeah.
And I'd heard Roy talk about that term master, and how, again, the idea of these words and these concepts like guru. And I even have students and individuals who have a really hard time with using the term God. Like that bothers them because of how they've been raised. And so now we bring up the word master, and for certain people that can have some really harsh connotations. But Roy would talk about the reason that we referred to, say, Sri Yukteswar as master, as Master Mahasaya, or Roy referred to Yogananda as master. It's because they were, like you're saying, they were masters of their states of consciousness. So it's like an acknowledgement of what they're capable of.
Yeah.
And that's the sticking point. That's always difficult, because again, the term God, the term guru, the term master, these can really take on some negative connotations because they've been attributed to people who've misused or abused their power. And that's a hard thing. And I still don't know how to encourage people to get beyond it, other than just to have this kind of conversation, hope to encourage them to look at it just from a little bit different viewpoint, or to break their attachment to the other contexts that they're bringing into it. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think what comes to mind just when you're talking about all that, I think people want certainty that what they're choosing, or the individual that they're choosing as being their master or guru, to be someone which won't let them down, someone which will stand through every trial. And the truth is that nobody's perfect. And I think I had that illusion when I started out, and even probably when I met Roy for the first time. I remember meeting Roy for the first time, and I had these notions, well, a master isn't going to do this, and a master is not going to do that, and the guru is going to be like this, and the guru is going to be like that. And Roy pretty much, not through any direct action, but just by my getting to know him as because I spent a couple of years in CSA, I got to know more about just the way he moved through life, and he's just an individual living life. The only difference is, as you talked, his states of consciousness and how he approaches things is with clarity. But I can never really, really be able to know that, because I'm not in not seeing the world from his perspective. So it's impossible for me to know that. So all I'm seeing is the outside goings on. And I might be going off point here a little bit, but I just remember one time CSA, you know, I was young and I was curious to see how Roy handled different situations, you know, because he's the master. He needs to do everything perfectly, because that's what the master does. And I remember there was a guy who used to come to CSA, can't remember his name, but he used to take care of the garden, basically, of the lawns. He used to cut the lawns and trim the trees. And he wasn't the Kriya Yoga practitioner. He had nothing to do with going to services or anything like that, but he knew Roy, obviously, as his employer. So one day Roy was coming, he came down in the car towards the office, and he got out of the car, and then this guy who was just cutting the grass had just turned off his tractor lawnmower and saw Roy and just shouted over, "Hey, Roy, hey, Roy." It was very, you know, very local, very informal, very kind of just jovial, just saying hello. And I was very curious, like, how's Roy going to deal with this? How's Roy deal with this person who's not a Kriya Yoga practitioner, who doesn't know anything about the CSA? How's he going to manage this? And Roy just said, "Hey, how's it going?" And just saluted him. And it was just as normal as could be. But I was kind of building up this expectation. Well, Roy is the master. He's this individual who has this kind of, I suppose, power in my mind, this kind of idea that he's going to be able to exude this his influence upon everybody, you know. And all he did was just be another human being having this interaction. And I think that's the beauty of it, is that masters are very much aware of the fact that they are just human beings. And it's the people who come to them for guidance and for instruction that put them on a pedestal of being something absolutely incredible. But I suppose where they merit and deserve credibility is the fact that they have been so disciplined and adhered to the practices which have allowed them to get clear in their minds. And also they've taken full responsibility for every aspect of who they are in this world. But they don't see themselves as being saintly. I know that we can use that term, saintly, but really that's just another concept of which can blind us to the fact that we are all human. And we all just have to take responsibility.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I've thought about a lot. I've talked about this a few times in some classes and maybe in another podcast, so hopefully the listeners will bear with me. But there's a story in Autobiography of a Yogi, and I need to really review it because I've talked it about 3 times and I still don't get it right, but I'll get the general idea. It was one of the teachers in the lineage, and I believe it was probably Swami Shri Yukteswar. And in that story, Babaji is appearing to or visiting with Swami Shri Yukteswar. And at first, Swami Shri Yukteswar can't see him. Like he's not able to perceive him. And Babaji then later says something like, "Well, I was hiding behind the sunbeams this whole time, but your mind was so disturbed or churned up or active that you couldn't perceive me." And I've thought about that story a lot because what I noticed is if our minds are really active or really stressed out or really tense, we could be sitting across from I'm using air quotes here, the holiest person or the most saintly or the clearest person in the world, and we're not going to recognize it because we're just so caught up in our own churning of stuff. And I've seen this happen very often with people around Mr. Davis and even other individuals I know who are quite clear and healthy-minded people. I remember even one teacher, he was in a healing discipline that I had studied. He was probably one of the clearest, most brilliant people I had ever met in regards to his capacity for healing. And I was at a training with him, and at lunch one time, I heard someone talking. They're like, "I don't even know why I'm here. He has just such a dark cloud around him." And then I went on to hear how they were talking about negatively about everyone. And I thought, wow, that's crazy. I've never experienced that. I've never seen that in this guy. And I recognized that their state of consciousness was kind of reflecting what they were seeing.
And I was listening to a talk from Christopher Sartain in Chile, also a student of Roy Davis and a Kriya Yoga teacher. And he was talking about the three kinds of gurus: the awakener, the reminder, and the liberator. And he was discussing how the liberator, just by being in their presence, you will naturally wake up and get clear. And I remember hearing stories of Ramana Maharshi, and there are people who had met Ramana Maharshi that didn't feel or experience anything, and other people who acted like as soon as they got in his presence, their mind was just utterly calm and clear and tranquil. And I think that kind of leads us to the idea of our own self-responsibility, that while there can be gurus, there can be teachers, there can be these saintly people, but if our own consciousness is all bent out of shape and neurotic, it's not necessarily going to benefit us in the way that a lot of these stories act like it should. There has to be some kind of readiness there, it seems.
I think, yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
I think that pretty much hits the nail on the head. It's just at a degree that we're ready to receive or to hear what's being shared. And I don't mean like actually just hearing the words. I mean the capacity to actually assimilate those words or take them on board. When you were talking there about the three types of gurus, that was kind of flickering through my mind, because I remember Roy used to talk about the three kinds of gurus as well. And I'm sure it's within other ancient texts, they probably talk about it in different ways. But I always think about it as, you've got a teacher who just has the knowledge to just share it. Like they have received the knowledge, they have a kind of the teaching skills to be able to share the knowledge, and so you're able to get it from them like that. Pretty much like you could from a textbook, but you've got that personable approach and they can answer some of your questions. And then you've got another kind of teacher. Yeah, they have all that knowledge, but they've actually investigated and used it and applied it to such a degree that they've actually had some insight of their own and an awareness of. And so, that is contagious, because when you meet somebody like that, whatever the discipline might be, not just in yoga practice or Kriya Yoga practice, but I remember I've taught a few different subjects, but I remember being in a classroom teaching art, and I'm not an artist, as in I don't dedicate my time to creating art, but one of the students just turned around to me and said, yeah, it's just that, you're really passionate about this because you're an artist. And I realized afterwards, no, she doesn't have that's not right at all. I'm not an artist. I don't even see myself as an artist, but I'm passionate about teaching. And also I've been through art college and I've created art. So I know I've had an experience from it. So I'm able to share it from that level, whereas she hasn't been through that. So she can't appreciate it. And then the third kind of teacher is the kind, the liberator, I suppose, is the person who is, well, they would be the artist, I suppose. And sometimes they don't actually even know necessarily the words to put on things, because that kind of just taints it all. It loses its mystery. So what they'll just be able to convey the message as Ramana Maharishi did, just through the silence and just through the consciousness that they're exuding, where they are in terms of how they perceive everything which is going on. So, yeah, I think it's useful to look at the three different types of teachers just in terms of what's available to us, and then just not to disregard something just because we think we're higher or above it, it's kind of, or that it doesn't resonate with us fully, because there's one thing I've learned, and this is just an add-on to what we're talking about, is that I considered Roy to be my guru, to be my teacher. I considered him to be a master, as in I considered him to have mastered this living condition and to have mastered his states of consciousness. It's my consideration, and it doesn't really bear much test, it's just my own opinion, but I actually considered it like that. And I remember when you and I were there one year at Richard Fish. We were at his place for a Kriya Yoga initiation the first year, but then the following year I went back again, and I was talking about my relationship with Roy, I think it was, or I was talking about my experiences in CSA, because most of the people there hadn't been at CSA. And afterwards, one of the people, people are asking questions, and one of the people present asked me, so do you consider Roy to be your guru? She says, it sounds like you consider Roy to be your guru. Is he your guru? And I just thought, I don't think I'd really, investigated it absolutely, but I answered yes. It was just like, yeah, because he's giving me everything that I need to be able to progress. And like I've read books, and I've had been on retreats where there was other people teaching, and I've had the benefit of receiving instruction from other people. And so they've all had played their part in terms of stretching me in my understanding and giving me information to be able to move forward. But Roy was the one person I felt I could return to consistently, and not just get the instruction, but also find support, and not necessarily support as in I have this problem, help me out with it. Just support as in he was a beacon that I could look towards and find guidance, and also just inspiration. And so it wasn't, and initially, as I pointed out earlier, I was kind of like, I had this expectation that he was going to be some kind of perfected person, this kind of great person who could yield his power upon everybody, or, that kind of thing. Childish notions, really. But,
yeah.
But when I grew out of it, and when I just through the process of being in his company and the application or my own commitment to my practice, you just begin to realize that actually, there's no one guru, really. It's all guru. It's all going on as the light which is guiding us. The consciousness itself is allowing itself to wake up in that paradoxical way. And I just found that Roy was my go-to figure for that. But since then, it took me a while to accept this. I think I was too, at one point, I got too overly maybe aligned to just receiving teaching from Roy, that I didn't allow teachings to come from other areas, or I was judgmental of them, or but again, with time, I came to know that actually there's teachings coming all the time. And even just talking to you, Ryan, even just, I didn't mean to put that in as a quantifier, but what I'm saying is talking to any individual, be it a sibling or a parent or just someone you meet in the street, I think there's always a moment, an opportunity for gaining insight and learning, whatever it might be, as subtle as it might be. But it's just when you have a go-to figure and somebody that you can continuously return to, that just creates a kind of a consistent learning, as opposed to an ad hoc learning where you're very much dependent on your own capacity to discriminate and discern what the learning is. When you're able to have this go-to figure to return to, you have something to measure it off, a framework, this individual that represents and shares. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And one other aspect of it that I'd like to touch upon and get your thoughts about. I just keep thinking more and more about this idea of teacher or guru, and we're just using those as terms, but that relationship, in the same way that I think of like a committed long-term relationship, again, with like a wife, a husband, a partner, spouse, or a friend even. And in my own experience, early on in life, I wouldn't say that I necessarily had friends that I trusted 98%. I had people that I spent time with that I enjoyed, but I didn't always feel that deep, profound connection. And as the years went on, and I attribute this to the practice of yoga, Kriya Yoga, the yamas and the niyamas, essentially just those ideas of trying to be a person to the best of your ability with integrity, who's trying to be committed and disciplined, who's just trying to embody those yogic ideals or those sattvic qualities. What I found is I started to recognize people whom were, I don't want to use the word worthy, but it's like I could recognize that, yes, these are people that I can trust. that these are friendships that will develop long term. And they weren't based on any kind of bursts of hormones or shared intense experiences. It was as though like when you're first in love. Well, when you're first in love, it's all hormones and expectations and Romeo and Juliet syndrome. And most people, once that fades away, then the relationship breaks down, falls apart, and people don't like each other anymore. But if individuals are able to get past that and just recognize the person I am with, I can trust. If I need them, if they can, they will come. If I have a question for them and they can answer it, they will. If they can't, they will tell me the truth and that they won't. And so that kind of relationship develops to where you start meeting people and you feel a sense of, I trust you. And it's not a hope. It's not I hope I can trust you. It's a knowing that they are there and that they are a presence in your life and will do what they can if you truly need them. And they're there to share life with you. And, when it comes to, again, love relationships, it's the same thing. When you get to that point of being able to know that that person is there to support you and be with you and not lie to you and call you on your bullshit when they need to, and you can take it and listen to it and contemplate it and listen to it or not, that's a real strong love. And I think that that's why it might be so hard with this idea of the guru, because, in our current situation, the culture, the way it is, gurus are promoted to be up on a pedestal. And I think they should be up on a pedestal if they inspire that kind of love and trust, and you're able to have that kind of relationship with integrity, because that is, in my experience, very worthwhile. Probably one of the most important things that you can have. And so I guess I'm trying to tease out this idea of moving from the idea of guru as the person who has superpowers that can save you, to that person who really embodies a sense of deep love and respect. And just one story comes up, and this occurred to me recently. And again, I believe I've talked about this somewhere else, but I was having a conversation with one of Mr. Davis's, Roy's long time students, who's been a student of Roy's even before I was born. So a long time. I'm not that old, but you get the idea. And one thing she said to me, and when she said it, I didn't take it in an egotistical way. At least I don't think I did. What she said was, you have to remember, Ryan, Roy adored you. And when I heard those words, I didn't all of a sudden puff up and think, oh my goodness, yes, the guru adores me. I'm so much better than every other student that was out there. What it did to me was it touched me in such a way that I recognized, well, that's perfect, because I adored him, and not in the sense of the pedestal, but in the sense of knowing that I could go to him and I could be myself. And he may or may not agree with it, but we had such rapport that it was okay. And there was that kind of connection, that communication. And so now when I think of that idea, when hearing her say, he adored you, again, it just reminds me that this is the importance, I think, of a real guru relationship, but it's also the importance of any healthy relationship. You should adore your friends. You should adore, your spouse or your partner, because when you have that kind of adoration, you have love. And I have one more thing, and then I'll turn it back over to you. The idea of love came to mind again. And I realized, when you love something, many people think that love changes everything, or love heals everything. And I don't think that's true, because if love is there to change or to heal or to transform things, is that really love? Because then it's for something. Like, love is for its own sake. Love is you love someone or you love something just because it inspires that sense, that devotion, not because you want it to be a certain way, not because you want it to change, not because you want it to be better, but just for the sake of being in that state of love. And I think that when we hear these discussions of like Yogananda, when he talks about loving his guru and the love between them, that can make some people feel a little weird, because they've never felt that
with any relationship. And so it's strange. It doesn't feel right. It feels taboo. But really, I think that is probably could be the highest kind of love that could exist, which is why I think trying to recognize or work with or have that kind of relationship or hold it in your mind that it is possible to have that intention is a very worthwhile thing. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up, and I'm curious, what your thoughts might be on those types of things.
Yeah, well, as you were speaking, different ideas and different responses came to mind. I'm just trying to pick which one to focus in on here. I think what comes to mind, one of the things that comes to mind, and as I said, there was many, but one that I'll just expand on is, in the Holy Science, when Sri Yukteswar describes the sattvic quality, I suppose, the quality of, he describes it as attractiveness, this kind of unifying force, this harmonizing force. And when you talk about love changing things, or, that sounds aggressive, that sounds more kind of rajasic, it's kind of like, but I feel that when we look at love as being a unifying force, and when we experience it within relationships, in its pure form, there will be conflicts, there'll be ups and downs, there'll be challenges and different things, but it's this desire for us to experience oneness, where we want to feel that we're unified as expressions of this reality. And so in that sense, I think that the challenges and the ups and downs, they give those moments of challenge which allow us to get closer almost. Actually, they do actually let us get closer, and they allow us to purify ourselves so as to be able to be closer. And then in other relationships, that will have a consequence. So it's this kind of unifying movement which is going on. And that's the way I think of love. Now I'm going to move on, just because you were talking about in relation to Roy and also Paramahansa Yogananda in relation to his relationship with Sri Yukteswar and the loving relationship that they experienced. I think there's two things that go on for people when they desire to find their guru. One is that they want to find a perfect being that they can call a master, who has it all figured out, and that will help them to feel reassured, that kind of thing. And I think the other thing that goes on is that they want to have a loving relationship. And when you were saying there that student of Roy's said to you that he adored you, I think that is probably what people are looking for. Even when Paramahansa Yogananda goes into great detail talking about his relationship with Sri Yukteswar, that's what people are looking for. They're looking for that kind of intimate relationship. And I know when I arrived at CSA, I had that in mind. I was like, yeah, Roy's going to be, I knew, because we've been in correspondence for a couple of years before I actually went there. But I had in mind that, yeah, it's going to be like Paramahansa Yogananda with Sri Yukteswar. We're going to have that, and he's going to iron out all my kinks, as Paramahansa Yogananda stated in the Autobiography of Yogi. But that wasn't the case at all. Roy met me and we chatted, and he was very welcoming towards me. But I had interaction with him, like one-on-one interaction, probably for 1 hour every week, I think. I was there for 3 months the first year. So it was weekly. We met for 1 hour. But it wasn't this intense kind of a relationship where he was always kind of at my side, with the opportunity to discern where I'm getting things right and getting things wrong. It was a more distant type of relationship. And if I'm going to relate that back to the kind of relationship that you had with Roy, you would have had a far closer relationship in terms of it went over a longer period of time. There was more frequency to the visits, and he allowed that. He facilitated that, because I suppose that's, it's just we all have different types of relationships with different people. Yeah, you want to say something in there?
Yeah. So remember what you're going to say, so we don't lose your train of thought.
Yeah.
Okay. The only reason I wanted to interrupt there is because I want to clarify that it was only after someone else told me and Mr. Davis passed that I recognized what I just described. But what you were talking about, being with him and sitting there with him, I don't know if it was different than what you're describing, because in my experience, it was
just being there and listening to him talk. But the thing that the thing that I always felt, though, as I was sitting there with him, drinking tea and listening to him talk, was there was no expectations, meaning I was comfortable. Like, it was as if all that is important is just be here and just share this time and this tea and this presence and whatever he wants to talk about or whatever questions he asks. So that, in my mind, that undercurrent of comfort or ease or naturalness, I think naturalness might be more the word, to me over the years of meeting with him, that is what I remember, and that is, in a sense, what I judge my own now good relationships with, because when I feel that around people and there's no need to do anything, be anything, you can just be present. That seems like the most important thing. So anyway, when I hear what you're saying, like, that doesn't sound any different than what my experience was. So again, you talk about having this idea of profound declarations of love and these types of things. Well, I never experienced that with Roy, but we spent time together. And it was as though there was a sense of understanding each other, which I think is what made the difference, trying to understand what he was getting at, what he was sharing. And there were certain things that it took me 3 to 4 years before I had to look back and say, oh yeah, I guess he was right.
Yeah. No, I understand where you're coming from. How he was with you was the same as he was with me. He wasn't any different. I understand that. The point I'm kind of trying to describe is just in terms of when people go to find a guru or endeavor to meet a guru, they have these expectations of what it's going to be like. And I know that after reading the autobiography of a yogi, I was kind of like, I want to find a guru who's going to be with me and guide me and have that perfect being kind of character, and also the kind of character which is very loving. And in terms of when we both went to CSA, I had the privilege of having interactions with Roy. If we were going to compare, we could say that you had more interactions with Roy.
Just over time, that's all.
That's it. And it's that earning of the trust and the earning of, it doesn't happen immediately. It doesn't happen just from visiting a place once or meeting a teacher once. You don't have this person just take you under their wing like that. But also one different thing, and this is where I'm getting at, that idea of experiencing what Paramahansa Yogananda experienced with Sri Yukteswar. I genuinely believe that most of us wouldn't be cut out for that, because Sri Yukteswar was hard disciplinarian, and he was always on Paramahansa Yogananda's case. And like, for Paramahansa Yogananda to turn around and express his love for him after that, I think a lot of us would have called it abuse. I think a lot of us would have turned around and said, what the heck? We wouldn't have been able to take it. Yeah. And I think what I'm really trying to describe here is just there's layers of how we experience the master or the teacher that we have the privilege of engaging with. And I experienced Roy in a way which was perfect for what I needed. And if he had given me more time, or if he had spent 2 hours instead of 1 hour, I don't know, I could have gotten warped in my thinking. I could have, it would have built up more of an expectation in me. It was just ideal for what I needed. What you needed, I think, was in line with what you needed. Yeah. And I think that's kind of it. It's just, it expresses just as we needed. And Paramahansa Yogananda got it just as he needed, which was with a high degree of intensity. So I think the expectations that we hold when we go into finding the teacher and finding the master, they're all going to be challenged. And that's the whole essence of finding the guru, is to accept that finding your guru isn't going to be a comfortable thing. It's actually going to shake you up big time, because it's going to just challenge all your doubts. And you can see that even Paramahansa Yogananda in his book, he talks about that moment when Sri Yukteswar was at the end of the alleyway and there was he was immobilized and he couldn't move around. He talks about it like that. But I'm sure there was a part of him, and there was a part of him all the way up before that, where he had met other teachers and he was always just kind of, no, not them, not them, not them. But as much as he describes it in the book in a very kind of black and white kind of manner, I think that it's not always as black and white for most people. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even with that story, what I always find great about it is, Yogananda has been looking for this teacher for his whole life. And finally he meets him, and Shrikeshwar says, I will declare my unyielding love to you. Can you do the same for me? And Yogananda says, yes, of course I will. And then he says, well, will you do as I say? And Yogananda says, oh, of course. And then Swami Shrikeshwar says, go back home and go to college. And Yogananda's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And then Sri Yukteswar says, well, who knows? Maybe I won't be so nice the next time. I mean, that's the general paraphrase. I know it's a little out of order.
That kind of sums it up perfectly. Yeah. I'm talking from my experience with Roy, because I only have that to kind of that I can talk about. But I know that I definitely felt challenged in the first 3 months I spent in CSA. I was challenged very vividly, just because I went in with a lot of expectations. The second year I was in CSA, that whole 12-month or 11-month lapse, whatever, how many months it was, I ended up accumulating other expectations. So I think it's just our nature that we and I think what it comes down to is that we're just passing the responsibility to the master. Really, when it comes to it, it's just not ready to claim responsibility yet ourselves. And I suppose that's what the process is. And the master that we do receive will be one which is aligned to our degree to be able to be responsible. Yeah.
Well, that last statement you made previous statements, and that reminded me again of the discussion with the longtime student of Roy's. And I had told her, my late wife, Melissa, and I, we had both become involved in Kriya Yoga at the same time, and spent a lot of summers and winters at Center for Spiritual Awareness with Mr. Davis. And Melissa would always say, because we met him when he was, I think, 69. And so we got the last 18 or so years of his life. And she would always say, I think we got the best version of Roy. Yeah, she would always say that. She would say, I think we got the best version of Roy. And the student that I've been talking about, she would talk about her experiences with Mr. Davis previously when he was younger, and he was a little different when he was younger. I mean, there's a reason that the books that he published, 50 or more books that he's published since he's been in ministry, there was a reason he didn't keep a lot of those in print. And when people would ask about that, he would say, because they don't reflect my current state of consciousness. And that makes perfect sense. And she told me, this woman told me, I'm sure she wouldn't mind if I used her name, but I don't know. I'm just trying to be safe here. She said, we get the guru that we need. And also, if we stick around long enough, even as the guru's consciousness shifts and changes and becomes more clarified, that will also be appropriate to what we need. So what you were saying just kind of reminded me of that idea. Yeah.
And what comes to mind when you're telling that story, because Roy himself, I remember talking to him in one of our one-on-one sessions. Yeah. And he was talking about Sri Paramahansa Yogananda the way he was in his latter years was far different to how he was when he started off Self-Realization Fellowship, and even in his writings. And because I think it was because I had seen a video of Paramahansa Yogananda explaining how to sleep consciously. You people don't know how to sleep. Exactly. Yeah. And Roy just said, he was different in the earlier days because, he was trying to gain attention, and also he had different motivations and different things. But also, we all know, when you're younger, you have a different type of energy than when you're older, and then your insights are different and everything. Yeah, so it's all relevant. Yeah.
Well, anyway, this has been a wonderful conversation. Do you have any final thoughts or anything you'd like to say about this idea of is the age of the guru over, or should we just call it a day?
I'll just say that I think we've been talking now for close on an hour, maybe 50 minutes. And I think the guru was present here during this conversation. And I don't mean that in some kind of holy, kind of magical way. I mean it just like, I'm now reflecting on everything I've said and things you've said. And I think all of that is room for insight and clarity. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, thank you for being here, David. It's been wonderful to see you, and I'm sure we'll have another discussion sometime soon.
Perfect.
Yes. And before we go though, so you are actively teaching in Ireland. What contact information would you give for people who want to find out about your classes and your offerings?
I think, the main one would be, I have a YouTube channel where there's a series of videos there. And the YouTube channel goes by the name of Kriya Yoga Meditation and Living.
Okay. Kriya Yoga Meditation and Living on YouTube. So if they search for that on YouTube, you'll pop up.
Exactly. And then there's also, I do have meetings like in December, we're going to have, I'm not sure when you're going to broadcast this podcast, but in December, I'm hosting some meditation meetings, and you can find out about them. I suppose the best way, if you go onto Facebook and you put in Kriya Yoga Meditation Coach, you get a Facebook page and you can message me there.
Well, this will be after December, so go ahead and check that for his future offerings.
Yeah. There will be.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much, David. It's wonderful to see you, and we'll be in touch soon.
A pleasure always, Ryan. Take care.
Yeah.
This episode of the Kriya Yoga Podcast was made possible by donations from Kriya Yoga Apprenticeship students and supporters of our Patreon community at www.patreon.com/Kriya Yoga.